Today, March 23rd, is Purim Eve. And so I thought it fitting to share what an awesome, triumphant story that this is, the story of Esther and Mordecai, and how their story turned from darkness to light, from a great threat to their very lives, the threat of extinction, to a victory, a beautiful time. And so on Purim, they dress up and they celebrate. And they dress up in costumes and masks and so on, because Esther's identity was hidden for a period of time. Did you know that Esther's name means star? She became a star because she shined brightly in a time of great darkness. Esther was the queen. She was a woman who had everything in the world that a person could want. She had success, she had wealth, she was married to a king, and Mordecai came to her and let her know the seriousness of the danger they were in. When there was a threat not only to her and her people, she had a choice to make. She could stay in her comfort zone and hope for the best, or she could step out in faith and trust the plan of God. And that is why she became a bright, shining star. Heroes are born in times of darkness. Let's read Esther's story here and what Mordecai says to Esther when the great threat to their very lives had gone out. Haman had plotted. And let's read what Mordecai said to Esther. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And the question is, who knows that whatever position of influence you've been given, that you were given that influence for such a time as this, the time that we find ourselves in right now. You know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is recorded historically to having said, to remain silent in the face of evil is evil itself. And it's, you know, fear causes people fear for their own preservation, for their own comfort, for our self-preservation or for our own comfort. Fear will grip a person and cause them to be silenced in a time when they need to be bold and courageous and step out in faith. Another thing I want to share is that Esther's story really shows us the great power of fasting and intercessory prayer against the plans of evil. Esther is faced with a choice. She will either risk it all and step out in faith, or she will hope for the best and stay in her life of great wealth and comfort and hope that she and her people are not unalived. That was really her choice. But this is what she did. This is why Esther is a bright, shining star, and that's what her name means. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. That is a real hero. Esther is a true hero. She put her own self and her own interests and her own comfort aside to say yes to a greater plan that would bring salvation to not only her, but her people. Her willingness to risk it all saved her people from extinction. We also see in the book of Acts, Acts 18, 9 through 10, the Lord spoke to Paul in the night by a vision. Do not be afraid, but speak, and do not keep silent, for I am with you. And no one will attack you to hurt you, for I have many people in this city. He was letting him know, do not be afraid, but speak. You know, speaking can be very intimidating when you're seeing the different things that are going on. There's just a lot of things going on right now that has caused people to be afraid to speak out on many different topics. And in Esther chapter 5, we read about Esther putting on her royal robes and presenting herself before the king. And he held out the scepter to her, so she had favor with the king, and he spared her life and granted her request. Esther asked to have a banquet with Haman and the king, and it is through this banquet that Haman ends up being exposed. So you can read in Esther chapter 7 how this whole situation reversed and turned on Haman. What he planned for Mordecai actually happened to him. The king had left and returned to this banquet Esther was having, and Haman had realized that he was in danger now for his life, and so he's pleading with the queen. And he's literally falling across the couch where Esther was. And when the king sees what's going on, it turns, and it turns around. The story is completely turned around. The threat to them and the threat that had been issued to them was revoked. And the very one behind the destruction was the one who was removed out of the way. Esther chapter 7, you can read about how the story completely turned around. And everything that Haman had planned for Mordecai was what happened to him. So this is how they started the Purim celebration, because what was meant to bring great sorrow turned to joy for them instead. I hope this is encouraging somebody out there today, that what was meant to bring us sorrow, God can use it to turn it around and bring us joy. So they called these days Purim after the name Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter, what they had seen concerning this matter and what had happened to them, they established Purim. And it was a time of remembrance to be observed, the memory that they didn't perish. Their story turned around. That's what I want to say about all this. It took someone who was willing to shine the light in the darkness and risk it all. It took someone who would risk their comforts for a greater cause. It took someone who would be that bright shining light in the darkness. Whatever influence you have, God Almighty can use you to shine a light in the midst of any dark situation, and he can turn our story around too. Just as Esther had the victory and her people, I'm believing that we're going to see victory too, and that whatever was set up for destruction will be turned around, and God will use it for good. God bless you, friends.